scripture reading this morning is from Philippians chapter 4, and then read verses 6 and 7. Philippians 4, verses 6 and 7. Do not be anxious about anything, but in everything, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. And the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. Amen.
Good morning to everyone, and I'll add my welcome to that of Antoinette. And it's so nice to look out and see your faces. This is not usually where I find myself on Sabbath morning, but when Newton asked me if I would present a topic, I said, well, really the topic that I have in mind is kind of a bigger topic that can't really be covered in one session, so would you mind if I had two? So we'll be focusing today on mental wellness, and then next week we'll be focusing more on what happens when further interventions are needed, and going more into the mental illness the kind of situations that people sometimes have to face. So to help me with this, and as my partner, I'm so glad that Sheila, with her medical expertise, and I know that there are others with medical expertise. I see Sandra there, who's a nurse in the hospital, and I see others who work in physiotherapy in different places in the hospital. So I'm glad that we have people in our congregation that have, good health information, and we can all share information together. So thank you also, Sheila, for agreeing to help me. As I begin, let's bow our heads for a word of prayer. Our Father in heaven, you have guided us in so many ways and been with us, and Lord, I pray that today, as we think about mental wellness, think about the mind-body-spirit connection, that you will be here, that you will be guiding, and that the information that's presented will honor and glorify your name. In Jesus' name I pray, amen. So, if you've been watching the news this week, you've noticed a theme in the news, and it's not been good. We've seen a lot of disaster and devastation this week, from an earthquake in Turkey to wars in Ukraine to a small town in Quebec. There have been horrifying stories of human suffering in the news. So as I watch these events, I can't help but wonder how people are coping with overwhelming life events. And yet, we have no choice but to move on beyond disaster, to deal with life events no matter how difficult they may be. As you sit here today, you may not have earthquake or wars to worry about, but each individual has their own life experiences to consider. Losses, fears, stress, feelings of loneliness, sometimes even hopelessness. It's all part of being a human being living in a sinful world. So today I want to talk about some of the aspects of mental health and what supports we can put in place to help during difficult times of life. So first of all, I want to go to the definition of what mental health is. This is what the World Health Organization says about mental health. It conceptualizes mental health as a state of well-being in which the individual recognizes his or her own abilities, so that you can be thoughtful and honest and reflect about your skills, what you can do and what you can't do, some of your abilities and limitations. You can cope with the normal stresses of life. So it doesn't say that you're not going to have stress, but that you have learned skills to help you cope, and that you can work productively and fruitfully. So you can set goals and plan to accomplish those goals and be able to make a positive contribution to the community. Okay, so those are the aspects of mental health that the World Health Organization has highlighted. But what does God have to say about mental health, and what is there in the Bible that can be words of encouragement about our mental health? So we see that God very much cares about mental health, and that the practices of mental health are very much rooted in Scripture. The prophet Isaiah, in foretelling the coming of the Savior, and he described part of his mission of the Messiah is to bind up the brokenhearted. And then Jeremiah wrote of the Messiah, I will turn their mournings into gladness. I will give them comfort and joy instead of sorrow. And Matthew, in the New Testament, we see that Jesus went through all the towns and villages, teaching in the synagogues, proclaiming the good news of the kingdom and healing every disease and sickness. So mental health issues are not unique to today's society. Let's think for a moment about interactions Jesus had with people. Think about the crippled man. Oh, I didn't advance my slides, so you can read this text too as I go on with the crippled man at the pool of Bethesda. A man who'd been paralyzed for 38 years. The Bible tells us that he was in a state of helplessness. He had no one to help him enter the pool when there was some kind of a rippling that they felt would have healing effects. But I can imagine he was also in a state of hopelessness. And hopelessness is one of the hallmarks of depression. 10 lepers who lived a lonely and isolated life. Poverty, no future. They had a terminal illness, and they were just waiting to die. Zacchaeus, a tax collector and an outcast. Imagine the emotional impact of being an outcast. He may have been short, but he also knew that the crowd would not welcome him to stand amongst them. The woman at the well in Samaria, her troubled past and desperate situation, she would probably have been diagnosed with some kind of a complex trauma, and her past left her with little hope until she met Jesus. The woman with the issue of blood, she lived in isolation with this condition for 12 years. She was thought to be unclean and dirty because of a physical condition over which she had no control. Jesus told the story of a prodigal son. He went on some kind of a manic spending spree, indulged in risky behavior, and found himself in the depths of despair when his money ran out and his friends abandoned him. So both in the Old and New Testament, we see that mental well-being was in question. In the Old Testament, Saul was known for having some pretty erratic behaviors. King Nebuchadnezzar, who crawled on all fours and ate grass for 7 years. And David, who was thought to have suffered from depression. So mental health problems have been around for a long time, but thankfully there's a growing global mental health movement around the world today, and the global church is beginning to recognize mental health problems as a major ministry priority. So if you look on the General Conference Department of Health Ministries, you see they have as one of their associate directors a psychiatrist named Torben Berglund, and he has published some articles on mental health. The North American division has some really good resources on mental health, mind and care kind of workbooks, and they're giving some special attention to youth and mental health, so it's really good to see these things. I was recently looking at actually some conferences in England and who are doing mental health workshops. And the Dr. Neil Nedley, who is the president of Weimar Center of Health and Education, and has both community-based and residential programs for depression and anxiety recovery. And that depression and anxiety recovery program, actually we have presented that here in our church prior to the pandemic twice now with Sheila and Jonathan, and I have gone through that it was about a 10-week program, I think, that we went through and advertised to the general public. So why is the issue rising to our attention and so often in the media? So what is the present situation of mental health in Canada? Here's some statistics from Health Canada. And these may be surprising to you. In any given year, 1 in 5 Canadians experience a mental illness. By the time Canadians reach 40 years of age, 1 in 2 have had a mental illness. So that's kind of a staggering statistic, but it also indicates that mental health illnesses don't have to be permanent and can be treated. So who is affected the most? Well, you might be surprised. The highest rates of mental illness are amongst young people ages 15 to 24. 39% of Ontario high school students indicate a moderate to severe level of psychological distress. And the most common of these mental illnesses experienced by teens are anxiety and depression. Men have higher rates of substance use disorders than women, while women have higher rates of mood and anxiety disorders. And mental health and physical health are linked, and I'm going to be talking really a lot more about that. People with a long-term physical health condition, such as chronic pain, are more likely to also experience mood disorders. And conversely, people with mood disorders are at much higher risk of developing a long-term medical condition. People with a mental illness are twice as likely to have a substance use disorder compared to the general population. And this is not, should not be surprising because people look for relief wherever they can find it. Many times substance abuse disorders are really attempts to self-medicate. And you know, I've heard several talks by Dr. Gabor Mate, who is a medical doctor and worked for many, many years in the east side of Vancouver with individuals who had drug addictions. And he had a much more kinder and sympathetic approach. He said it's not really appropriate to ask what is wrong with these people, but to ask what happened to them. What is the backstory? What are the situations of their life that led to this condition? And when we look at suicide rates, now suicide is probably the most dangerous outcome that can happen usually from depression. About 4,000 Canadians per year die by suicide. That's an average about 11 suicides a day. And in 2018, suicide accounted for 21% of deaths among children ages 10 to 14, 29% among youth ages 15 to 19, 24% amongst young adults 20 to 24. So I think that it's really important that we really take good care of our young people and really focus our attention in those areas. And then, because we live in the north, we know that suicide rates in the north are even higher. Indigenous people, especially youth, die by suicide at rates much higher than non-First Nations, about 6 times higher. And suicide rates for Inuit youth are about 24 times the national average. So those are really, sad and staggering statistics. So we've looked at a definition of mental health, but what is mental illness? So you can imagine that if mental health means coping, that mental illness refers to disorders of thought, feelings, and behaviors that results in inability to cope with the demands of everyday life. There are over 300 mental health disorders in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Health. It's a book about this thick. And they're in categories, and I'll just mention some, like anxiety disorders. There's about 8 specific disorders in that category. Mood disorders, there's 4 or 5 in that. Trauma and stress related. neurodevelopmental disorders, substance addictive disorders. Like there's many under each of these sections, and that's only a few of the sections that are even in the book. The most common mental health disorders are depression and anxiety. So the main emotion in depression is sadness, and the main emotion in anxiety is fear. So, but we all experience sadness and fear to some degree. So what distinguishes the normal ups and downs of life to mental health disorders? Well, this graph may help you. If you look at this graph and you notice that it's just a kind of a visual of depiction of moods, really. So the middle line is considered normal emotions. So notice that this person is coping because there's this window of tolerance in the above and below. As long as you stay, if your graph is operating in this window of tolerance, you're thought to be coping. So, you know, you have, something nice happens, someone gives you a nice compliment, you get a gift, you have a birthday, so you have good moods, but the body tends to want to come back to kind of the normal, calm, chill kind of state. So even that high, happy mood doesn't last for long. You just come back to being okay, I'm okay. And then you might have a disappointment, or something sad happens, or a loss, and you go down below that line, but as time happens, you recover because you haven't gone down too far. You're still within your ability to cope. So when someone has a mental health problem, the mood keeps going down and down and down. And it's very hard for them to recover. It never really comes up back to that normal. They might try and recover, but never quite make it there. And then another stress comes along, and stress piled upon stress really can send a person outside of their window of tolerance. And then they need to be doing something to get themselves back into their window of tolerance and hopefully back to kind of a state of well-being where they can manage. So this is kind of a graph that shows kind of just a visual depiction of how our emotions can be going up and down, and we can still be fine because we know that all of us experience emotions. If you didn't experience emotions and were just flat all the time, that would be something to be worried about too. So we want to have those happy times, and we want to be able to experience sadness, to comfort each other during sadness, to empathize with each other during times of sadness, and give each other support. So today, though, I want to mostly focus on the mental health and how to avoid getting to the point where the stresses of life are overwhelming. We need to recognize that mental health does not happen alone. There's a balance between mental, physical, and spiritual. So we need to look at this topic holistically. Ellen White, back in 1905, in Ministry of Healing, said these words: "The relation that exists between mind and body is very intimate. When one is affected, the other sympathizes. The condition of the mind affects the health of to a far greater degree than many realize. Many of the diseases for which people suffer are the result of mental depression. Grief, anxiety, discontent, remorse, guilt, distrust all tend to break down the life forces and to invite decay and death. In the treatment of the sick, the effect of mental influence should not be overlooked." So, have you noticed the connection between your mental health and your physical health? Maybe some of you haven't, and you know, I know that during the COVID pandemic, we focused a lot on our health, right? Both mental and physical. And especially early, and we learned a lot of things in the pandemic. We learned how to wash our hands and sing happy birthday. We learned about being around each other, but yet being safe, wearing masks, social distancing. We learned you can do almost anything on Zoom. Who knew that you could do almost anything? Like, we had to be creative, right? And we also learned about physical and mental health and how they're connected. I'll just give you an example, because, you know, were you ever in a situation like me where you had a sniffle, you felt a scratchy throat, you felt a little more tired than usual, and you said, oh, I wonder if I have COVID. And then you get the test out, and you go, oh, negative. Oh, all of a sudden, all of my symptoms miraculously disappeared. Look, I see some of you nodding, see? And I said, oh, that is all physical and mental being connected. So it really isn't a miracle. It's just that it's a good indication that really our bodies and minds are very much connected. So today I want to focus mainly on how to prevent mental illness and how to implement some key elements that may help to treat mental illness. The first line of defense is always to strengthen the base. And today we're going to look at some lifestyle factors that both are preventative and restorative. In this case, there are natural remedies that influence good physical health and then good mental health. So what are these natural remedies? And Ellen White really talked about these right back there in 1905. So your first line of defense, the first three, fresh air, exercise, sunshine. I put those together because wouldn't that be great if you could get all three of them together, right? Just think, go for a walk in the sunshine, not in January though, and get some good fresh air. So we do have a little bit of problem with the sunshine at some times of the year, and then we have great sunshine at other times of the year. So in the winter time, you kind of have to get outside at noontime if you want to see a little bit of that sunshine. So fresh air. So we're fortunate that we live in a place with good fresh air, right? Like there's lots of places in the world where the air is not fresh and people are told to stay inside at different times. But we have good fresh air except during forest fire season. So then you got to really be careful about it. But so, and just breathing in fresh air. Here's a little exercise that is meant to really help breathing in fresh air, or breathing in air. Sometimes it has to be indoor air, obviously. And it's an exercise that really helps with anxiety too. It helps slow the heart rate down and calm a person down. So it's breathing in for 4 seconds, hold it for 4 seconds, breathe out for 4 seconds, hold it for 4 seconds. And repeat that pattern several times until you feel some kind of a calming effect. So really the first line of defense for any anxiety disorders is usually some kind of breathing. And there are many, many different exercises in breathing. I just thought I'd show you this one that I often use, and some of you might be trying it right now. So fresh air is really important. Exercise, at least 30 minutes 3 times a week is the suggestion. And rhythmic motion of large muscles, walking, jogging, swimming, cycling, cross-country skiing, or Wonders exercise class. There's a good exercise that all of you can try and some of you can do. No wonder it does have some, he makes it fit for all. So good exercise relieves symptoms of depression, anxiety, substance use disorder, and ADHD, attention deficit hyperactive disorder. And usually we consider ADHD as a childhood disorder, but there are more and more adults getting diagnosed with attention deficit hyperactive disorder. And it might not be so much we get hung up on the hyperactivity, but sometimes it's more the attention and the inability to focus that's really the hallmark of ADHD. And sunshine. Well, outdoors is great when it can happen because natural sunlight gives us good serotonin, and that's good for helping us be more focused, emotionally stable, happier, and calmer. Also, vitamin D, it's good for helping the body manufacture vitamin D. But like I said, it's a tough one in the summer. In Yellowknife, except in the summer. But you know what? February is one of the most hopeful months of the year. Have you noticed? I always say, I love February. The sun comes back, right? So where you used to be going to work and going to school in the dark, coming home in the dark, February you go, oh my, it's sunny. And often we do get quite a bit of sunshine in February. It's also a very good month for northern lights, just because of the clear skies. So if you can get outside, that's great. But during those dark months, November, December, January, you know, there is a light therapy that a lot of people find helpful. There are specific kinds of light for a condition called seasonal affective disorder, where people find their moods very low in the winter, and it's especially prevalent in northern climates. So these lights provide intense light. 2,000 to 10,000 lux, and lux are a measure of light intensity. 2,000 to 10,000. The outdoor sunlight is about 50,000 lux, and indoor light is about 5,000. So indoor light isn't going to do it. If you find yourself needing some kind of support for mood during dark months, these special lights that you can buy, order them online, or I don't know if drugstores around here sell them, but they're very intense lights, and about 30 minutes a day seems to help. It also can help you get more restful sleep, and so rest is the next one that I'm going to talk about. So our bodies operate on a 24-hour circadian rhythm, and apparently if people are put in a cave where they can't see sunlight, still they operate pretty much on a normal cycle of sleep and wakefulness. So it's really important to get proper sleep. Sleepless nights and feelings of despair are very closely linked, according to studies conducted by the National Institute of Mental Health. They considered insomnia to be sleep problems that have lasted for more than a year. But everybody has occasional sleep problems, and even those occasional sleep problems put us at higher risk for depressive episodes. So it's really important for individuals to find what works for them, right? So light therapy can help, regular exercise can help, avoiding electronics before bedtime can help. We often recommend that for kids. Just calming the mind in some way, but each individual, I know some of you have your own little tricks that you use to help you get good sleep. And there's also clinics that actually study this, so if you find yourself really needing help, there are clinics that can help with that. Water. Important for flushing out the body, toxins, preventing dehydrations, and one of the early signs of dehydrations, headaches. A rough guideline by Canadian dietitians is 9 cups per day for women, 12 for men. But that can include food as well, the water you get from food. So if you eat lots of fruits and vegetables, you'll get more water content from those. And there are times when you need more water, like during exercise, in hot weather, if you're sick or have a flu or some kind of an infection, and women pregnant breastfeeding obviously need more water. Avoiding drugs and alcohol. If you've noticed on the news lately, Canada has been really studying and publishing the results of studies on alcohol consumption. And where they used to say the recommended are not to exceed 5 drinks a week, I think. Now they say 2. 2 or less. Well, I prefer less, but that's really, and they have linked alcohol consumption with cancer, and especially breast cancer in women. So these are really recent studies and really quite amazing studies as far as, you know, it certainly opened my eyes to some of the risks of alcohol consumption that maybe we hadn't really considered that much before. And then drugs, that's such a big topic to talk about, but prescription drugs can be beneficial and life-saving. Non-prescription drugs that alter the mind and body can be very addictive. And I'm afraid that in Canada we're kind of getting into a crisis in those areas, in our large cities. And like even when Blake and I were in Hawaii, oh, the problems they have there with drug addiction and people living on the streets, and like it's really, I guess maybe because I don't live in a city, but it really was very visible, the amount of devastation that to people's lives is caused by drug addictions. So those are the first 6, and now I'm going to ask Sheila to come and talk about diet and how that can affect our mental health.
Happy Sabbath, everyone. So I would like to share with you about mental health and nutrition. So just a few tips on, as Wendy mentioned, but for sure I'm not the expert, and I'll share what I know and I have read. Okay. So what I'm going to share with you are based on multiple research studies, and if you are actually interested in reading the whole articles, please let me know and I'll give you the information. But whatever we eat or put into our body really affect various body organs and its functions. So by eating healthy diet, it reduces our odds of depression and suicide. Okay? Especially if we increase intake of whole grains, olive oil, vegetables, and fruits. Again, this reduces the risk of depression according to the studies. In contrary, the more refined foods we eat that are high in sugar contents, meat and refined grains, it increases our risk of depression. And the healthy diet I am referring to is predominantly plant-based diet. In one study, they actually concluded that in actually just 2 weeks of no meat, fish, and eggs, it actually showed a significant improvement in depression in just 2 weeks. And furthermore, avoiding foods high in arachidonic acid, which can be found in eggs and chicken, it is again correlated to depression and increased likelihood of suicide. Particularly when we eat fruits and vegetables, it can improve, as you know, like physical functioning, sleeping, creativity, eudaimonic well-being, which means being concerned about living well and actualizing one's human potential. And of course, evidently, you probably are familiar with some of this, like turmeric, saffron, probiotics, flax seeds, walnuts. Carbohydrate-rich evening meal actually improves our mood, according to studies. But what are the things we should avoid? Okay, so study shows that fried foods, refined grains, and sugary products increases the chances of depression and anxiety. So when we are anxious and or stressed and eat an ice cream, what do you think? Would that help us? Okay. And also, in another study, by frequently eating fast food, there is 40% of chance of developing depression than those who avoid fast foods. Okay? This one is like if you want to up it again, like, high fruit and vegetable intake, meaning like, we will eat at least 7 daily servings of fruits and at least 8 servings of vegetables. It actually can predict our mood the next day. It predicts like a positive mood the next day. Isn't that amazing? And so when we talk about the servings, it's actually like 1 cup of cut fruit or 1 cup of frozen vegetables or fresh vegetables, or a whole fruit is 1 serving. You just consider that as a 1 serving. Okay, so how about let's quickly look at micronutrients and mood. And these are the vitamins and minerals and we can get from whole foods. They are packed with various vitamins and minerals. Some may have more contents of minerals and vitamins for some other whole foods, but they're all good, okay? Our body uses the vitamins and minerals it needs. And no overdosing. If you're eating like a whole food, like a whole fruit or a vegetable, you will only limit your, eating certain kinds of foods that are high in some micronutrients if you are diagnosed of very specific conditions of your high potassium or low potassium, then you have to balance those. But otherwise, if there's no diagnosis, it's better to eat a whole food and you get all the vitamins and minerals that you need. Okay, so, and again, with eating that whole food, we also are, benefited from its linked actually with mood disorders if we are deficient of micronutrients, okay? And even just increasing our vitamin C, it helps with our dopamine, which Wendy have mentioned earlier about dopamine and serotonin as well. And the dopamine, which is our transmitter that helps with pleasure, satisfaction, and motivation. So eat lots of whole foods. We have to avoid processed foods. According to studies, intake of anti-inflammatory diet, which is meaning no or little intake of meat, fish, and eggs, are associated again to less depression. And if we increase our intake of magnesium, folate, long-chain omega fatty acids, which are omega fatty acids from plant-based, they are actually again associated with less depression. Okay, so that's the one. Forgot to move my slides. Okay, now I would like to remind everyone to not forget our vitamin D, because as you know, you take your supplements of vitamin D, especially for us here in the north, because it is also linked to increased depressive symptoms. Okay? And there's also a dose response between types of fat intake and depression rates. So just like diets higher in trans fats were associated with increased risk again of depression. Okay? So when we say whole food, predominantly plant-based diet, we focus on whole fruits and vegetables and eating a rainbow of color. Okay, so just think about that. And eat a variety of plant protein, legumes and nuts and seeds. And we have to choose whole grains. And again, drink water for hydration. And I also have a booklet that It's about food as medicine. It's a simple jump starter. And if you are interested, let me know and I can print and give you a copy of it. It's a very small booklet that it has simple guides and also some simple recipes that you might want to try. Okay, so what do we do to maintain or achieve mental health? To take small steps if you want to improve health. And if you have illness, then you need to make, or we need to make, radical change or intensive lifestyle change to achieve healing or reversal of disease. Think about seed of change, okay? Small change at a time, such as adding 1 cup of spinach in my meals 3 times a week for 2 months. That's a goal. Make it specific and ask God to help you be victorious in your goal to achieve that optimal health. And again, this does not excuse me. I am also in the process of making small seeds of change, still struggling in many ways, in many things when it comes to healthy diet, but it is what is important. It's to make the step. Okay? And to end, there is abundance of evidence that what the Bible is instructing us to follow is actually very much supported with what is out there, evidence, and also what our Spirit of Prophecy inspired writings are telling us years and years ago. And so they are well supported in our days. And so we have an awesome God and a Creator who gave us these whole foods that we could have. So I would like to end with 1 Corinthians 10, verse 31. Therefore, whether you eat or drink or whatever you do, do all to the glory of God. Amen.
Thank you, Sheila. And the last on our list is trust in God. And Matthew 22:23 says, love the Lord with all your heart and all your soul and with all your mind. Do you find solace in going directly to God? This passage in Matthew teaches us that my thoughts and state of my mental health matter to God. He asked me to love him with all my heart, and he is interested in my thoughts, emotions, and ideas. Trusting in God refers to an inner faith experience. If people have a loving, kind perception of God as someone who is supportive, they find greater mental health benefits than someone who has a more fearful, threatening view of God. In addition to an inner faith and trust in God, being part of a religious community can also be helpful as well. And religion gives people something to believe in, provides a sense of structure, and typically offers a group of people to connect with over similar beliefs. These facets can have a large positive influence on mental health. So there's a community, a sense of belonging, social interactions, and the community is especially important during times of difficulty. And religious communities encourage kindness, forgiveness, and gratitude. So we've looked at 8 natural health remedies that are both preventative and restorative. They highlight the connection between physical, mental, and spiritual health. These are our first lines of defense. But what happens when we get outside of our window of tolerance and need additional support to return to a healthy and coping mental state? I like the title of the article in the Adventist News that I was reading, What to Do When You Can't Pray the Depression Away. What can you expect if you need to seek professional help for mental health issues? What can we, even without formal mental health training, do to support each other? These are the topics that I want to cover next week. And I'll leave you with this text. Be anxious for nothing, but in everything, by prayer and supplication, with thanksgiving, let your requests be known to God. And the peace of God, which passes all understanding, will guide your hearts and minds through Jesus Christ. My hope is that you find this peace, and in doing so, your mental health sees amazing benefits.
Amen. The companion song for this sermon today is 466, Wonderful Peace. And as we sing this song, notice the relational aspects of good mental health. 466. Let's stand, please, as we do this song together. Far away in the depths of my spirit tonight rolls a melody sweeter than song. In celestial light strains it unceasingly falls o'er my soul like an infinite calm. Peace, peace, wonderful peace, coming down from the Father above. Sweep over my spirit forever, I pray, in fathomless billows of love. What a treasure I have in this wonderful peace, buried deep in my innermost soul, so secure that no power can mine it away, while the years of eternity roll. Peace, peace, wonderful peace, coming down from the Father above. Sweep over my spirit forever, I pray, in fathomless billows of love. I believe when I rise to that city of peace, where the author of peace I shall see, that one strain of the song which the ransom will sing in that heavenly kingdom will be. Peace, peace, a wonderful peace, coming down from the Father above. Sweep over my spirit forever, I pray, in fathomless billows of love. Well, weary soul with no gladness or comfort or rest, passing down the rough highway of time, make the Savior your friend ere the shadows grow dark. Oh, accept of His peace so sublime. Peace, peace, wonderful peace, coming down from the Father above.
thank you for such a promise of peace in fathomless billows of love. Lord, may we receive that from you, and may each individual here go out today with peace in their heart and a new information and new determination to give attention to physical and mental health. In Jesus' name I pray.
Amen.